In the early hours of Christmas Day 2024, a taxi stopped outside a quiet home in Norton Canes. Inside the cab was 33-year-old Kirsty Carless. She had been drinking, had taken cocaine, and was holding a kitchen knife from her own house. Only hours earlier, she had been shown a screenshot of her ex-partner, Louis Price, on Tinder. Enraged, she tried calling him over and over, but he never answered. Before leaving, she told her mother, "No matter what happens tomorrow, I love you." Now, with a spare key in her hand, she walked through the garden and into his parents' home. What happened next would destroy two families forever.
So Kirsty, I need to stand up for me, love. Kirsty, listen to us.
Yeah.
I'm arresting you for the murder of Louis Price. I must caution not to say anything, but in my home defence, if you do not mention my question, so much your little line in court, anything that you do to me be given in evidence. Turn around, face me, love.
Kirsty and Louis's relationship had been volatile and toxic for years before the murder. Locally known by her maiden name, Kirsty Cribb, she had been involved with Louis for about 2 years, and the couple shared a young daughter together. They both struggled with drug abuse, and their turbulent relationship frequently drew police attention. Authorities classified them both as being at high risk of harm from domestic abuse due to the numerous calls each made to complain about the other's behavior. Neighbors and friends reported that the pair's arguments often erupted in public and sometimes escalated physically. Kirsty's personal life was in chaos, even before she met Louis. She had previously been married and had 4 older children from that marriage. However, her marriage fell apart, reportedly due to her erratic spending habits, such as compulsively redecorating the family home multiple times a year. After the divorce, Kirsty's lifestyle grew unstable. At one point, social services intervened, and relatives took over care of her children as she struggled with her circumstances. It was during this period that Kirsty began a relationship with Louis, described as a big-hearted Aston Villa football fan who was also a keen fisherman and a devoted father. Unfortunately, their union quickly became toxic, marked by jealousy and substance abuse. In the weeks leading up to Christmas, the volatility between Kirsty and Louis turned dangerous. A serious domestic incident on November the 11th foreshadowed the violence to come. Kirsty was arrested after she poured bleach over Louis's clothes, squeezed his neck, and struck him during an argument. She was subsequently charged with assault, occasioning actual bodily harm for this attack. At the time, police deemed Louis to be at very high risk from Kirsty's abuse, a warning sign that, tragically, went unheeded as events unfolded. Kirsty was released on police bail with strict conditions to stay away from Louis and refrain from contact. However, despite these protective measures, the couple continued communicating and remained entangled in each other's lives. Multiple red flags were present in the relationship's final days. Kirsty had a history of volatile, possessive behavior toward Louis, and he himself had contacted authorities out of fear more than once. Friends would later describe Kirsty's demeanor as controlling and easily angered, while police investigators labeled her manipulative and jealous after examining the pattern of incidents. The stage was set for a potential tragedy, one that would erupt in the early hours of Christmas Day. Christmas Eve began without an obvious incident, but it would end in catastrophe. That night, Kirsty went out drinking at a local pub with a male friend, indulging heavily in alcohol and cocaine. She ended up back at that male friend's home, where the two had sex multiple times, and she initially intended to spend the night. But shortly after 1:30 a.m. on Christmas Day, as Kirsty was still at her friend's house, she received a message that ignited her fury. A female friend sent a screenshot of Louis Price's new Tinder dating profile, revealing that her ex-partner was attempting to move on and meet other women. This proved to be an emotional trigger for Kirsty. Upon seeing that Louis was on a dating app, she flew into what the court would later call a jealous rage. Despite the fact that she herself had been with another man that evening, she became enraged at the thought of Louis with someone else. According to phone records presented at trial, Carless immediately tried to reach Louis. Between 2:15 a.m. and 2:44 a.m., she placed 45 calls to Louis's phone, one after another, but he didn't answer any of them. These incessant, unanswered calls only fueled her anger. Amid this barrage of attempts to contact him, she also made an ominous phone call to her own mother. In that call, Kirsty told her mother that, "No matter what happens tomorrow, I love you," a statement which prosecutors later highlighted as proof that Carless knew she was about to do something gravely serious. Determined to confront her ex, Kirsty left her friend's house and headed back to her own home in Cannock. There, she armed herself. She grabbed a large 12-inch kitchen knife. Before leaving her house again, she also snorted more cocaine and continued drinking, becoming heavily intoxicated. Investigators later noted that the mix of alcohol and cocaine in her system was a dangerous combination known to increase aggressive behavior. In this state of mind, Kirsty booked a taxi to take her to the address where Louis was staying at his parents' home.
Hello, can I have a taxi, please?
Where's it from? Yeah, and where are you going to?
I'm going to Elm Road in Norton.
It's going to be about 20 minutes.
Yeah, that's fine, Bob.
Thank you. See you soon.
Right, bye-bye.
Her taxi pulled up to Louis's parents' house at approximately 3 a.m. on Christmas Day. As the cab stopped outside the residence, the driver asked Kirsty to pay the fare before exiting. Kirsty refused to settle up right then, instead telling the driver she would be back in a minute and asking him to wait for her. This statement would later be seen as evidence of her premeditation. She then stepped out of the taxi, kitchen knife concealed, and used her own spare key to enter the Price family home without knocking. Once inside, Kirsty went searching for Louis. She headed upstairs to a spare bedroom where she believed he might be sleeping. Finding the room empty, Carless moved through the house. Louis was actually in the back garden socializing with friends that night. When Kirsty entered the house, Louis realized something was wrong and rushed inside toward the house's conservatory, but he would not escape his attacker. Kirsty came face to face with Louis in the downstairs area, and she launched the attack. She plunged the kitchen knife into Louis's chest, piercing a rib, puncturing his lung, and fatally piercing his heart. The wound was catastrophic. A pathologist later testified that Louis's injuries were so severe that he would have died within a minute of being stabbed. In that single vicious strike, Kirsty had mortally wounded her ex-partner. There were no defensive wounds on his body, and camera footage showed that Carless attacked without any attempt at conversation or hesitation. It was a sudden, deliberate attempt to kill. Louis, gravely injured, tried to flee, stumbling into the back garden in a desperate attempt to escape. Kirsty pursued him outside. Louis then collapsed due to the massive trauma to his heart. Kirsty then chose to flee. She left the knife on a kitchen countertop inside the house and ran back out the way she came, leaving Louis to die on the floor. The entire confrontation, from the moment Kirsty entered the property to the moment she fled, lasted less than 2 minutes. At about 3:02 a.m., Kirsty dashed back to the still-waiting taxi outside. She was visibly agitated, and she urged the driver to leave immediately. She instructed him to drive her to a nearby family member's house, which turned out to be her mother and stepfather's home in the same area. As the taxi left the murder scene, Kirsty did nothing to alert anyone about Louis's condition. Meanwhile, back at the Price residence, Louis's friends and family were left to discover him bleeding and unresponsive on the conservatory floor. Paramedics were dispatched and arrived on the scene to treat Louis, but there was little they could do. Despite efforts to resuscitate him, Louis Price was officially pronounced dead at 3:46 a.m. on Christmas Day. Not long after Louis was found, police received another call, this time from a person who knew Kirsty. In fact, as soon as she reached her parents' house, she confessed to what she had done. Her horrified stepfather immediately dialed the authorities to report her confession and the location where she could be found. Police officers rushed to Carless's family home and arrested Kirsty in the early hours.
So Kirsty, I need to stand up for me, love. Kirsty, listen to us.
Yeah.
I'm arresting you for the murder of Lewis Price. I must caution not to say anything within my harm of defence if you do not mention my question, so much you let her lie in court. Anything that you do to me be given in evidence.
According to one detective, Kirsty was oddly quiet and hard to read during her arrest and subsequent questioning. She mostly answered no comment to police questions and revealed little about her mindset. The investigation into Louis Price's murder gathered overwhelming evidence of Kirsty's guilt and premeditation. Detectives quickly pieced together the timeline. Video from the property proved crucial. It showed Kirsty arriving and then stalking Lewis around the garden with a knife in hand during the brief chase, confirming that she was the aggressor and that the attack was swift and unprovoked. The 12-inch kitchen knife used to kill Louis was analyzed, and investigators discovered it matched a set of knives from Kirsty's own kitchen at her home. The phone records showing 45 missed calls, as well as the chilling call Kirsty made to her mother beforehand, helped establish her state of mind and planning. Prosecutors argued that these calls were not only evidence of her rage, but also of her calculating resolve. Toxicology tests later revealed that Kirsty was severely intoxicated on the night of the murder. When arrested, her blood alcohol level was nearly twice the legal driving limit, and tests showed the presence of cocaine in her system as well. In fact, Kirsty's legal team attempted to use her intoxication and mental state as part of her defense, indicating that she had diminished responsibility or was in some kind of dissociative state during the killing. Carless initially claimed that she could not remember what happened during the crucial moments when Lewis was stabbed. She had pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of manslaughter, hoping the court would find she lacked intent due to her impaired condition or emotional disturbance. However, the mountain of evidence suggested otherwise. The Crown Prosecution Service built a compelling case that Kirsty's actions were deliberate and calculated. The digital evidence of Kirsty's own communications revealed that she had lied in her police interviews, at one point claiming she found the knife at Lewis's house. By the time the case went to trial, investigators had assembled a comprehensive narrative of a jealous ex-partner who planned and executed a deadly attack on Christmas Day. The 2-week trial took place in July 2025 and included harrowing evidence of the Christmas Day killing. After roughly a day of deliberation, the jury, composed of 7 men and 5 women, returned unanimous guilty verdicts on the charges of murder and possession of an offensive weapon. The judge sentenced her to life in prison with a minimum of 25 years to serve before she can be considered for parole. Dressed in the dock, Kirsty showed no visible reaction or remorse as the sentence was read. Throughout the trial and sentencing, she had largely maintained a blank expression. With a 25-year minimum term, Kirsty will be in her late 50s at the very earliest possibility of release, and only if a parole board deems she is no longer a danger. In the courtroom gallery, Louis Price's family and friends wore "Justice for Louis" t-shirts as they witnessed the outcome of the case. Members of Lewis's family provided victim impact statements that movingly described who Louis was and the void his death has left. His mother, Eleanor Price, said her son was murdered by the woman he loved. She described Louis as a funny, beautiful man and expressed the pain of a mother outliving her child. In the wake of the sentencing, it also emerged that Kirsty's case prompted a review of how authorities handled the situation, since she was out on bail for a previous assault on Lewis at the time of the murder. Staffordshire Police conducted an internal review and referred the circumstances to the Independent Office for Police Conduct. However, they determined that no further investigation was needed, effectively finding that police had taken reasonable actions, such as arresting Kirsty after the November incident, imposing bail conditions, and flagging the case for multi-agency risk assessment. Domestic violence dynamics were not lost on observers of the case. Detectives noted that this was a stark example of female-on-male domestic homicide, something that is less common. Police and prosecutors hoped the case would encourage male victims of domestic violence to take threats seriously and seek help, as there is often a stigma that makes men hesitant to report abuse. In this case, multiple warnings and previous incidents had signaled the danger, yet ultimately, they were not enough to save Louis Price's life.